The cold, dark place. I'm jolted awake by a loud bang. My eyes snap open, heart racing, as I instinctively pull my upper body away from the car door, searching for the source of the noise. Relief and embarrassment wash over me when I realize it's just another traveler getting back into their vehicle at the rest stop. I watch the pickup truck pull out and merge back onto the highway, waiting for my heartbeat to settle. I glance around to ensure no one else is nearby, trying to rationalize my fear as natural. After all, I've only been in Montana for a few weeks and am still getting used to it. It's my first time in this part of the state, so being a bit jumpy is only natural. I cross my arms over the steering wheel and rest my head on them. Not long ago, lying to myself would have been beneath me. I had been many things, but never a liar. Now, I cling to these self-created falsehoods like a drowning man grasping a life raft. I'm pathetic. I know it. I try to muster anger at this knowledge, but only loathing and resignation come. With a sigh, I get out of the car and head toward the rest stop buildings. The other parking spaces are empty, and I'm alone. The night is cold, and I pull my coat tighter around me in a vain attempt to keep the wind off my skin. It's oddly bright tonight, something I'm still not used to about Montana. The clear sky, probably due to the low population and wide open spaces, lets the moon and stars shine brighter here than anywhere else I've been. The rest stop is simple, 2 concrete buildings, one with bathrooms and the other with vending machines. I head into the men's room and approach the nearest sink. Above it is a dirty mirror, cracked in one corner and hard to see into even under the dim overhead light. I stare into it anyway. 5 months ago, I stood in front of a similar mirror in a bar's bathroom. Things were different then, better. There was no fear or the overwhelming exhaustion that now accompanies me. I was powerful, confident, at the top of the food chain. I look away from the mirror in frustration. That was then. Now, I'm nothing. Just a hollowed-out husk of the man I used to be. After a moment's hesitation, I lift my shirt and examine the small scar under my right armpit, with jagged lines radiating from it. The gunshot wound healed quickly but left this reminder. Sometimes, during the coldest and quietest nights, it aches. I quickly lower my shirt as another man enters the bathroom. He nods at me before entering a stall. I wait for him to finish and leave. It would be easy to kill him, just reach over, wrap my hands around his thin neck, and that would be it. So simple. But I lack the desire and capability to make it real. The man dries his hands and leaves. Alone again, I glance at my reflection. Very alone. I had come to this rest stop hoping the full moon would trigger a transformation, as it had before. I've been to various places throughout the state with the same hope, but nothing ever happens. The wolf below is gone, just as the wolf above is. I should be angry, but I'm just tired. With another sigh, I leave the bathroom and return to my car. There's no point in staying any longer. Nothing is going to happen. I drive the 2 hours back to the small town I now call home. It still feels strange to live in one place. I had stayed in some areas for long periods, especially where I could fulfill my needs in seclusion, but never in the kill zone itself, and never in the same place for more than a week. Camping and motel hopping had been my way of life. Now, for the first time, I've put down roots. If you can call living alone in a small cabin miles from town in the middle of the woods putting down roots. I interact with others only when necessary, at work or getting supplies. Outside of that, I keep to myself. As I approach town, I turn off the car's headlights. Although nothing happened tonight, I don't want anyone to know I was gone and came back so late. In a small town, such observations lead to questions. I'm too tired to risk giving an answer that might come back to haunt me. I understand I'm being paranoid. I haven't killed anyone since coming here, but the paranoia doesn't go away. Better not to feed it. Once past town, I flip the lights back on and continue toward home. A few miles down the road, I turn onto a gravel path, and after about 4 miles, I maneuver onto a nearly invisible dirt trail. It's extremely uneven, and I go slowly to avoid bottoming out. Finally, I arrive at the cabin. I park the car around the back and go inside. It's a small structure, just a sitting area, kitchen, and bedroom, but it meets my needs. I toss the car keys onto the counter and stretch, pausing as an odd feeling washes over me. Nothing seems out of place, but something feels off. I shake my head, blaming the persistent fear that's become part of my life. It makes me physically sick to be so pathetic. A noise from outside startles me, too loud and clear to be imagined. Something stepped on the frozen grass by the east wall. I rush to the kitchen and grab a small handgun from the drawer. I hate guns. They felt too impersonal when I was killing, and now I detest relying on one for safety. I check to make sure it's loaded and the safety is off. A shudder runs through me. At first, I think it's fear, but then I realize the cabin's temperature has dropped dramatically. The windows are fogging up and frost is creeping up from the bottom. More footsteps sound outside, slowly making their way around the cabin towards the front door. The windows on that side are completely frosted over, but I see a dark shape move past one behind the couch. Whatever it is, it's huge, blocking out all light for a moment. The footsteps stop at the door. Silence falls, the only sound my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, the smell hits me, a thick stench of blood and rotting flesh. It feels like it's pressing against me. Heavy breathing comes from the top of the door frame. I'm being hunted. I've been the hunter enough to recognize the situation. Whatever is outside is coming for me, and once inside, it will kill me. My body shakes, just like in Broken Bend. I'm completely powerless to stop it. All my experience and skill mean nothing. I'm nothing. Bile rises in my throat. My weakness almost makes me vomit. It will almost be a relief when the creature breaks down the door and kills me. At least then I won't drown in self-loathing and mental frailty anymore. I wish I weren't so weak so I could open the door myself. But then, the presence suddenly moves away, and I hear it hurry off. I stand in the kitchen, confused, the gun still in my hand. After a few minutes, I build up the courage to open the door. There's nothing there but a faint hint of the creature's stench. I take out my phone and turn on the flashlight. In the frozen grass, I see long, narrow footprints ending in thin claws, leading back into the woods. I close the door and lean against it. Whatever happened is over now. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I glance at my phone. It's less than an hour before I would normally wake up for work. There's no point in trying to sleep now. I sit in a chair, staring into the distance until it's time to leave. Ram's Head, Montana, is a small, isolated town. Almost everyone either runs a business downtown or works for the logging company in the western woods. I work on the town's maintenance crew, handling line maintenance, repairs, plumbing, that sort of thing. I park in front of the mayor's office. Ram's Head is small enough that all the town government departments share a building. I nod at the receptionist as I pass. I don't think I've ever learned her name. I head downstairs to the basement, where the maintenance office and record storage are located. Ignoring the records room, I enter the maintenance office. Tom, one of the 3 maintenance employees, is finishing paperwork at the single desk. We chat for a while about the burst pipe behind the thrift shop he repaired last night. Tom is older and has lived in Ram's Head all his life. As he talks, I mull over something. I decide to tell him about my morning, keeping it vague and making it seem like a story I heard, not my own experience. The last thing I need is people thinking I've gone crazy or asking questions. Tom listens silently, then gets up, motioning for me to follow. He leads me to the records room, digs through the boxes, and hands me one labeled Wendigo. I recall the legend, something about a person who eats human flesh turning into a monster. Tom assures me he's serious. While he's never seen the creature, his parents were convinced they had. Almost every family in Ram's Head has at least one member who claims an encounter with the Wendigo. We talk a bit more before he yawns and calls it a day. I return to the maintenance office with the box. With no pressing projects, my interest is piqued. I say goodbye to Tom and watch him leave. Sitting at the desk, I open the box and pull out the files. Many statements sound like lunatic ramblings, but as I piece together the common elements, a clear picture forms. I read until the receptionist enters to inform me it's lunchtime. I gather a few files for later and thank her before heading to the diner. The cafe is nearly empty, just the owner's daughter, Angie, working. She's friendly but often pesters me about attending church. I can't stand church. Too many people. The setting, like the full moon, would remind me of what I used to be but am not anymore. I find an empty booth and glance at the clock, dreading the question Angie always asks me. "So, what'll it be today?" she asks as she approaches. "Just a coffee, thanks." She gives me a look, but I avoid eye contact. She shrugs and heads to the kitchen. As she does, I think about the events of the morning and the information in the box. A theory forms in my mind, leading me to consider what to do next. If the creature is a Wendigo, it might not be an enemy. There might be a chance for an understanding, especially if I can find a way to communicate with it. Angie returns with my coffee. "You know, the church is having a potluck tonight. You should come. It'll be good for you to get out." "I'll think about it," I lie. Angie smiles and leaves. I sip my coffee, lost in thought. A Wendigo is a dangerous creature, but so was I. There might be something to gain by seeking it out. Maybe, in the end, it could help me rediscover my own strength. Before we continue the story, if you enjoy this kind of content, I encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with new videos. Now, let's continue the story. Most of the time, creatures kept their distance, conducting their business without bothering me. However, there were 2 occasions when one dared to challenge me while the wolf was out. By the time I finished with them, there was nothing left to suggest they had even been there. Broken Bend was different, but dwelling on it now served no purpose. This Wendigo was unlike anything I'd encountered in my human form. Last night was the full moon, meaning it's roughly another 28 days until the next one. If the Wendigo returns before then and decides to come inside, I won't be able to stop it. I powered up the ancient computer on my desk and went online to gather information about Wendigos. There wasn't much useful content. Wendigos were often considered more spirit than monster. These spirits could possess someone who committed cannibalism or possibly through a Wendigo's bite or scratch. But, as with everything on the internet, distinguishing fact from fiction was challenging. The day dragged on, my exhaustion from the previous night weighing heavily. With little to occupy my mind, time seemed to crawl. I had to fight off sleep multiple times, but the 4th time, I gave in. No one ventured to this part of the building except maintenance staff. Everyone else called or emailed. The sound of the office door opening jolted me awake. I quickly straightened and blinked away the grogginess as Tom walked in, smiling. He was here to relieve me. A glance at the clock showed it was past 6. I'd been asleep for over 5 hours. Instead of heading to my car, I walked to a nearby diner. Refreshed from my unexpected nap but hungry from missing lunch, I ordered a meatloaf sandwich to go. The diner was nearly empty, so I was back on the street within 10 minutes. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of dark blue and purple. I savored the cold but pleasant night breeze after being stuck in a windowless office all day. Despite the changes since Broken Bend, my preference for the outdoors remained. I paused about a dozen yards from my car, spotting a tall, thin figure standing motionless just outside the tree line across the road. I couldn't see its face from this distance, but I felt it watching me. There was no doubt it was the Wendigo from the cabin. Its proportions were all wrong for a human, and I knew instinctively what it was. As the wolf, I'd stalked people the same way it was stalking me. It tilted its head slightly, and I saw the dark outlines of sharp antlers jutting out from its sides. I could feel its malice, but there was also a sense of curiosity. I dropped my food bag as something stirred inside me, a sensation I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. The wolf within had sensed the Wendigo's presence and reacted. Could the Wendigo be the key to reclaiming who I once was? but as quickly as it came, the wolf fell silent, leaving me empty again. If the Wendigo's presence wasn't enough to bring it out, maybe it was better to move on. The Wendigo stared at me a moment longer before disappearing into the brush. I knew it would return soon. That message was clear. Satisfied the creature was gone, I retrieved my dinner and got into my car. I took a deep breath, pondering why the Wendigo was so interested in me. Perhaps it sensed the wolf buried inside me as a rival. Maybe it just hated the way I looked. Shaking my head to clear it, I headed home. One thing was certain, the Wendigo's intense hatred meant I wasn't safe until I dealt with it. The smart move was to run, gather my things from the cabin, and get far from Ramshead. I had no deep connection to this town, and based on the reports Tom presented, the Wendigo did. Leaving would be like Broken Bend all over again, get out of its territory and be safe. My face grew warm with a mix of shame and anger. Running hadn't gotten me anywhere but to a town in Montana, working as a glorified handyman instead of being a god of the hunt as I once was. I shouldn't have run then. I should have stood my ground. Either I would have emerged victorious over a great enemy, or I would have died trying. Either was preferable to this. I wasn't leaving. Let the Wendigo come. If I had to do this alone, so be it. At the cabin, I quickly secured the doors and windows, scattered knives and sharp objects around, and holstered my gun. These precautions might not make much difference, but every bit helped. Without much knowledge about Wendigos, I tried to think of what would have slowed me down as the wolf. There wasn't much, and most of what might work wasn't available to me. I grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace and turned off the lights. The darkness wouldn't hide me, but it might make it harder for the Wendigo to see me from outside. That was the theory, anyway. Just as I finished my food, I heard a faint noise outside. I wondered if it was my imagination until a twig snapped. I definitely heard that. Slowly, I got to my feet, leaving the poker on the couch, and drew my gun. The temperature in the cabin plummeted. I could see my breath. It was here. This time, it approached the front door. An idea struck me. I opened the opposite wall window, not large enough for the Wendigo but usable as an emergency exit. The footsteps stopped at the door, followed by silence. I pointed the gun at the entrance, waiting. Wood splintered as the creature scraped its claws against the door, testing or toying with me. It would come through eventually, and when it did, I'd have my chance. Heavy breathing from the other side reminded me of its look back in town. This wasn't a beast to be scared off by a gun. The door shook, then the lock broke, and it swung open. The Wendigo stood in the shadows, steam billowing from its bone-covered snout. Its eyes were deep-set black orbs, antlers extending 3 feet out, twisted and ending in thick stakes. Its mouth opened, revealing razor-sharp teeth, longer than any I'd seen. It was a living nightmare. As it bent to enter, I snapped out of my paralysis and fired the gun until it clicked empty. Every shot hit, but it didn't seem to notice. Dropping the gun, I grabbed the poker, the cold metal painful to hold. The Wendigo, now inside, moved toward me with a sound like a growling dog mixed with a hyena's cackle. I swung the poker, striking flesh and bone, but it was like hitting a brick wall. The creature snarled, grabbed the poker, and threw it into the kitchen. I grabbed a nearby knife and plunged it into its chest, but the blade barely penetrated. The Wendigo bit into my shoulder, tearing off strips of flesh. Knocked to the floor, I scrambled back as it devoured the skin, blood running down its mouth. My shoulder burned, but I forced myself to my feet. There was no winning this fight. I needed to escape. I hoisted myself through the window, falling to the frozen ground. The Wendigo's arm lashed out but missed as I lay flat. It crashed around inside, heading for the door. I realized escape was impossible. My car was out front, the same direction the Wendigo was headed. It would catch me before I drove away. Hiding in the woods wasn't an option either. My only hope was to confuse it enough to make a mistake. I re-entered the cabin, hiding by the fireplace. The Wendigo approached the window from outside, growling in frustration when it didn't find me. It moved towards the woods, thinking I'd run. I leaned against the fireplace, bleeding and lightheaded. As my body began to change, the wolf emerged quickly, unlike the slow, painful transformation of before. The Wendigo's bite had triggered the change. The hunger was overwhelming, but suddenly, it was gone. For a brief moment, the Wendigo and I were one. I saw through its eyes and heard the whispers of the entity infecting me. Then, everything went black. I found myself in a freezing dark place, shaking uncontrollably. Was I deep inside my mind or within the Wendigo spirit? Did it matter? The spirit controlled my body, driven by insatiable hunger. The cold grew worse, drawing heat from me. The wolf and I had been symbiotic, the Wendigo was a parasite. Rage built inside me. The Wendigo had invaded and violated me, targeting me to lock me in this Arctic prison. But I was never alone. "I know you're out there," I called into the darkness. No response. "You know what this thing is doing to us. Are we just going to let it happen?" More silence. "You are. You're just going to let this thing bleed us dry until there's nothing left." Something shifted in the darkness. "This is about Broken Bend, isn't it? We ran away like cowards, but I didn't give up on us." "You did." A snarl echoed, two red lights appearing in the darkness. The wolf advanced, its murderous intent clear. "Where's this been since Broken Bend?" I demanded. "You abandoned me. I've killed for you, kept you strong, and you left me." The wolf stopped, eyes wide. "I don't need you. I don't need anyone but myself." The wolf stared at me, its red eyes burning with a mix of anger and pain. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. "You left me when I needed you most," I continued. "But I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm demanding that you help me now. Not for us, but for me." The wolf hesitated, its growl softening. Slowly, it lowered its head and stepped back, the darkness around us beginning to dissipate. I felt a surge of warmth, a flicker of hope. "We can do this," I whispered. "Together." Suddenly, I was back in the cabin, my senses sharp and heightened. The creature was outside, confused and searching for me. I could feel its hunger, its desperation. But I also felt my own strength returning. I knew what I had to do. I moved silently, creeping towards the door. The creature's back was turned, giving me the opportunity one needed. I lunged, my body moving with a speed and power I had never experienced before. The creature turned too late. I struck, using my claws to tear into its flesh. It howled in pain and anger, but I didn't relent. This was my fight. My victory. The battle was fierce, but it didn't last long. The creature was strong, but it was also desperate and reckless. I, on the other hand, had a newfound purpose and determination. Finally, with a final, brutal strike, the creature fell, its body dissolving into a pool of dark, oily substance. I stood there, panting, covered in the creature's remains. The hunger inside me was gone, replaced by a calm, steady strength. I had won. But I knew this was just the beginning. The wolf was still with me, a part of me. We were no longer symbiotic, but we were also not enemies. We were partners, bound by our shared struggle and determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I could face it. I had survived, and I would continue to survive. No matter what came next. I stepped outside, the cool night air washing over me. The forest was silent, peaceful. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I knew I had a long road ahead, but I was ready for it. I was strong, I was determined, and I was not alone.